Imagine playing a game of chess where the board is constantly shifting. The pieces can change alliances mid-move, and a single misstep doesn't just mean losing a game, but triggering a regional crisis. That is the reality of the geopolitical landscape in the Middle East today. We are looking at a complex web of kinetic actions, from the Gaza Strip to the hills of southern Lebanon, all the way to the Syrian desert. How do we make sense of a conflict that seems to have so many moving parts, where every action triggers a reaction across multiple borders?
It really is a multidimensional chessboard. When we talk about Israel's current military actions, we aren't just looking at isolated border clashes. We are looking at a highly coordinated, multi-front confrontation involving state and non-state actors, primarily driven by the long-standing proxy conflict with Iran. To truly understand it, we have to look past the daily headlines and dissect the underlying strategic logic. We need to analyze the mission, the strategic pressures, and the mathematical game theory that dictates the moves of each player.
Let's start with the strategic pressures. If we look at this through a classic pestle analysis, the political and security dimensions are obvious. But what about the economic and social factors driving these decisions?
The economic and social factors are actually critical constraints. Politically, Israel is operating under immense domestic pressure, balancing national security with political survival and the demands of its populace. Economically, the cost of sustained mobilization is staggering. We are talking about defense spending, lost productivity, and the disruption of key industries like tech and tourism. On the other side, Lebanon is facing a near-total economic collapse, which heavily constrains how Hezbollah can operate without completely alienating the local population. Socially, the displacement of civilians on both sides of the blue line creates a ticking clock for policymakers. Then you have the technological factor. The use of precision guidance, AI-driven targeting, and drone warfare has completely rewritten the tactical playbook, making traditional geographic buffers less effective.
It seems like a classic case of asymmetric capability versus structural vulnerability. If we apply the MOST framework, mission, objectives, strategies, and tactics, what is the actual mission here? Is it total deterrence, or is it something more containment-oriented?
Historically, the strategy was dubbed mowing the grass, which was a periodic containment strategy. But post-October 7th, the mission shifted to a fundamental restructuring of the security environment. The objective is to dismantle the immediate threat capabilities of Hamas and push Hezbollah back beyond the Litani River. The tactics are highly kinetic. Targeted strikes in Syria to disrupt Iranian supply lines, combined with intense pressure in Gaza and southern Lebanon. But the strategy faces a major challenge. Can military tactics achieve a permanent political objective when the regional dynamics are so volatile?
That is the crucial question. If the political objective isn't clear, the tactics just become a loop of violence without an end state. Let's look at this through the lens of a spear analysis, focusing on security, political, economic, allied, and regional dynamics. How does the allied component fit into this?
The allied component is the gravity well of the entire conflict. Israel relies heavily on the United States for ammunition resupply, diplomatic cover, and intelligence sharing. But this alliance isn't a blank check. The U.S. has to balance its support for Israel with its broader global strategy, which includes avoiding a direct war with Iran and maintaining relations with Arab partners. Regionally, we see a fascinating tension. While public opinion in the Arab world is intensely hostile to Israeli actions, many regional governments quietly view the containment of Iranian influence as a strategic necessity. This creates a dual-track reality where public rhetoric and private strategic alignment are often at odds.
That is a fascinating paradox. It shows that what happens behind closed doors is often very different from the public narrative. And speaking of analyzing these complex dynamics, we need to take a quick moment to talk about our home here at the New Sentinel.
Right. If you are enjoying this deep dive, you should know that this is exactly what we do. The New Sentinel is a podcast dedicated to providing in-depth discussions on a wide array of topics. We jump from the glitz and glamour of pop culture to the strategic intricacies of military operations like the one we are discussing today.
We design every single episode to give you a comprehensive understanding of the subject matter, featuring expert interviews, detailed analysis, and engaging storytelling. Whether you are a pop culture enthusiast or someone with a keen interest in global security, we have something for you.
So, if you want to stay informed and entertained, make sure to tune in, view, subscribe, and leave a comment. And if you are an entrepreneur looking to reach an engaged, curious audience, we can help you advertise your product or service right here.
Absolutely. Now, let's get back to the strategic board. Before the break, you mentioned the challenge of aligning military tactics with long-term political goals. Let's look at this through a SWOT analysis. What are the internal strengths and weaknesses of the key players here?
For Israel, the strengths are clear: unparalleled technological superiority, intelligence gathering capabilities, and strong allied backing, particularly from the United States. But the weakness is strategic overreach, economic strain, and internal political polarization. On the flip side, the proxy network led by Iran has the strength of strategic depth and asymmetric resilience. They don't need to win in a conventional sense. They just need to survive and inflict continuous costs. Their weakness, however, is the severe economic misery of their host populations in Lebanon, Syria, and Yemen, which limits their domestic political legitimacy.
That brings us to the threats and opportunities. The threat of a miscalculation leading to a full-scale regional war is always looming, but is there an opportunity for a new security architecture?
There is, but it requires a shift in the payoff matrix for all parties. And this is where game theory becomes incredibly useful. If we model this conflict, we aren't looking at a simple one-shot game. This is a repeated game of deterrence.
Like a continuous prisoner's dilemma, where cooperation is logical but trust is entirely absent?
Exactly. Or even a game of chicken. Both sides are driving toward the cliff, hoping the other swerves first. Israel wants to establish a red line that Iran and its proxies will not cross, while Iran wants to demonstrate that any action against its network will trigger an unacceptable cost. The problem with a game of chicken is that if neither side swerves because they believe the other will, you get a catastrophic collision.
But in this case, the players aren't just two drivers. You have multiple actors with different utility functions. Hezbollah has its own domestic survival to consider. The Syrian regime is trying to rebuild and doesn't want to get dragged into a war that could end its rule. How does that change the equilibrium?
It creates a nested game. For example, Syria acts as a transit corridor. Israel's kinetic actions in Syria are designed to raise the cost of cooperation between Damascus and Tehran. By striking Iranian assets on Syrian soil, Israel changes the payoff for the Syrian regime, making it increasingly risky for them to host these proxy forces.
So, it's about shifting the cost-benefit analysis of the opponent. But if we look at the Nash equilibrium here, the state where no player has an incentive to unilaterally change their strategy, it seems the equilibrium is actually this state of low-level, persistent attrition.
Sadly, yes. The current Nash equilibrium is a violent status quo. Neither side can achieve total victory, but neither side can afford to back down without losing credibility and security. For Israel, accepting a hostile presence on its borders is unacceptable. For Iran, abandoning its proxies means giving up its primary forward defense mechanism. So, the game continues to play out in this tragic cycle of kinetic escalation and temporary pauses.
It makes you wonder about the human cost of this strategic calculus. We talk about payoff matrices and deterrence, but on the ground, these are human lives, destroyed infrastructure, and generations growing up in conflict. How do we move past a game theory model that assumes rational actors when emotions, history, and trauma are so deeply embedded in the decision-making process?
That is the ultimate limitation of pure game theory. It assumes players are perfectly rational calculators of utility. But in reality, ideological convictions and historical grievances often override rational economic or military logic. The real challenge for future policymakers is not just winning the game, but changing the rules of the game entirely.
Perhaps by introducing new variables, like regional economic integration or security guarantees that address the fundamental fears of all parties involved. But until then, the chessboard remains active, the moves remain dangerous, and the stakes couldn't be higher.
It is a sobering reminder that strategy is not just an academic exercise. The decisions made today will shape the geopolitical landscape for decades to come.
Indeed. Thank you for walking us through this complex web today. And to our listeners, thank you for tuning in to the New Sentinel. Keep questioning, keep analyzing, and we will see you next time.